Thank you once again, honorable opening speakers. I'm now very happy to introduce our moderator of a high-level session on catalyzing private sector investment in digital to enhance green recovery in emerging economies. For this, we have the presence of Mr. Festus Gakuoh, who is the project coordinator of a regional program Energy Security and Climate Change in Sub-Saharan Africa at the Konrad-Adenauer Stiftung. Festus, perhaps you can, welcome to the stage.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute fantastic morning. We've had some very rich presentations right now. And I wish that we dive our first panel of the day because time has really given us a bit of stress. And before that, I would like just a few seconds in relation to the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation in Africa, and also the work that we're doing at I lead at the regional program and we support the development of renewable energies in Africa. And we do so by organizing activities that are touching the nexus of energy security and climate according to sustainable number 7. We do so by particularly promoting policy and creating for sustainable and improved adaptation and mitigation that is a law as well as national level. In partnership with our projects to analyze potential of green jobs creation from the centralized renewable in West Africa, and we aim to provide evidence of the issues to make especially those on the policy level, as well as international funding partners, of the potential of DRE. That decentralized renewable energy has the potential to create various jobs opportunities which are direct and also indirect. It is also a catalyst for skilled local job creations, and due to its multiplier effect, it encourages a growth while empowering climate resilient communities. So during the project, we shall develop various materials from the objective, sensitive, or rather to sensitize policy needs, and also to enhance awareness of the essential roles in green recovery with emphasis on creation and climate change mitigation as well as adaptation. We will publish some reports with key recommendations to enable the creation of future jobs in rural areas and throughout the DRE value chains, and especially in West Africa. We are focused on 2 countries for the start, that is Ghana and Senegal. And this report will be available both in English and in French. You shall find some time and interest to go through this once it's established and published on the homepage. We are looking at a tentative date there about August, I believe. Yeah, great. Now, without further ado, I would like to just into the theme of this panel discussion, whereby we are looking on catalyzing private sector investments in decentralized goals to enhance green recovery in emerging economies. The panel is about to introduce features key private and public investors who that is decentralized. In particular, government's role and the recovery in pay on private sector investment in recovery or Sub-Saharan Africa. Without further ado, make a very introduction as I ask the panelists to join me on stage. Very brief for the interest of time. I may start with Koech. Koech, who is, I believe, the midst of us. There she comes. She's the country president, East Africa Directorate. Applause to Carol. Thank you for being here with us. I will also ask Mr. Cédric, who is the head of cooperation at the delegation of the European Union to the United Republic of Tanzania and East African Community. Warm welcome, sir. Next, I have two already speakers who will be here. Daniel. Schroth again is the country engagement, is the director of energy AfDB. Next, I have Dr. Gonul engagement and partnership at IRENA. And I have two more speakers. Mr. Michael Lat, excellent. Thank you so much for being here with us. Mr. Michael, the Senior Climate Officer at the European Investment Bank. And finally, Liva Idrunits. There she comes. A big hand. Liva is a policy partnership manager energy. Thank you ever so much for joining us this morning, and it is indeed great to share this with you for this morning. Due to the interest of time, I will ask you to make some very brief submissions in reference to the questions that I shall pose this morning, because we have a lot to cover, but very limited time. Yeah. So, Mr. Daniel Schroth and Mr. have opportunity to give us a brief introduction of the organization they present and the work they're doing. I'd perhaps ask Dr. Daniel to give us a brief fact of the support that you're giving to private driven in revocation in the emerging markets. So just give us some key initiatives within the space.
Sure.
We might need some help with the mic.
Is it? Okay. Thank you very much for the question. And indeed, let me just highlight a few key initiatives in the decentralized energy access space. And they're all sort of aimed at mobilizing more private sector investments in the sector. One is we have looking at both some of the also so the upstream side, we have launched several years back our Green Mini Market Development Program that really has been sort of a catalytic tool on the one side with governments in terms of the legal regulatory framework, which is of course very critical for mini-grid developers to have a good sense of grid expansion plans, to have a sense of licensing requirements, to have a sense of what happens when grid arrives. Are there sort of compensation mechanism procedures in place? Different our community partners, we have been able to serve over 100 mini-grid developers across the continent with different types of support, from kind of helping to get a better sense of the demand, given that demand is not growing from one day to the next. There's a lot of kind of effort required to grow the demand. Two aspects of towards mobilizing more financing, getting to the business shape to be able to access financing from various solutions. So that's one key area. The second one, so we're trying now sort of approved our Africa Mini-Grid Acceleration Program, which is really trying to take this to the next stage, particularly through larger scale kind of national or kind of tender programs that really try to attempt to make a contribution to the question of scale that I raised earlier. We have been financing the notification program, which is still to date the largest program of that sort. We are also supporting tender auction process in DRC. We're involved with mobilizing different types of financing for the Green Mini-Grid program in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Admittedly, those are very large mini-grids. I'm not sure that the term mini-grid is still appropriate, given that these will be powering sort of cities of 100,000 inhabitants. But I think the model is still relevant, whereby we as a finance institution provide upstream support, but then also provide sort of a package of staple finance with concessional resources mobilized from the Green Climate Fund, with concessional resources from our in-house blended finance facility, our Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, all that blended with our private sector lending. I think that kind of those financing packages will be a key contribution to also to other similar programs that we're working on with several countries. Finally, just to mention two additional instruments. One is the Facility for Energy Inclusion. We have had development, obviously, the challenge from a perspective. How can we support some of those smaller businesses, those smaller companies that, from a perspective, is just not viable for the bank to lend to direct. To fund operational several come to contact and part that we were instructed to set up in the first instance, mobilizing junior capital in that blended finance structure allowed them to invest well and get more the energy access sector, and that is precisely why we were able to $117 concessional from the Green Climate Fund for our leveraging energy access finance framework that is really trying to bring and de-risk investments for local financial institutions of the decentralized energy sector, initially focusing on 6 African countries, but with the potential that and expanded to other countries as well. So that's just a snapshot of some of the initiatives we're undertaking, if not being comprehensive, but I think in the interest of time, I leave it at that. Thank you.
Absolutely great. Thank you ever so much. Dr. Gunnar, I would like to build on this. What IRENA is doing on the same point to support the private in the of renewable electrification.
Thank you very much. Africa is one of the regions that we have extensively involved and supported since day one of IRENA. This includes the energy access, but focus on of grid that will be in for the audience. This is the work that we have started with Uganda, and we can support integrating decentralized renewable energy into agri-food chains. When we talk about agri-food value chain, it is about irrigation, but also all agro post-harvest agro processes, milk, cold rooms, and how different commodities, how renewable energy solutions can be integrated. This is the first part of the solution. Second part of the solution is about how we can develop specific financing schemes together with local actors and integrating ourselves into the ecosystem of the country, being part of the ecosystem of the country. We don't want to bring solutions off the shelf, but we want to develop those together with the key actors in the country. Mr. mentioned we're trying to bring sustainability with bringing in efficient applications, but also affordability by bringing in those institutions who can help us develop those concessional financing schemes. We are working with several funds and several philanthropists to be able to bring in those people into the picture. Obviously, we will be working with both expert institutions, also the financial institutions, bringing those experts who's already sitting there, good experiences available, and whether this can be tailored to the African context in the context of Rwanda and Uganda. Obviously, there is that how we can work with entrepreneurs and how we can develop entrepreneurs. And we have been already implementing the entrepreneurship support facility. Started in West Africa around 5-6 years ago. Now we are implementing in Southern Africa together with SACRI, Southern African Renewable Energy Efficiency, and implementing a scheme where SMEs, medium-sized renewable energy entrepreneurs can be supported, has to be mentorship support. Mentorship support taken to the next level, and across Africa we are now developing a so-called entrepreneur twinning program, so we can mobilize peer-to-peer technical support for those who can offer that expertise and those who need that kind of technical expertise. So it's basically what we are trying to do. We are trying to cover the entire spectrum of activities from the project origination until it is brought to financial closure and working with different stakeholders along the value chain.
Excellent. I love how you articulate this matter, IRENA, and I would wish that Mr. Michael can build this a little bit for investment bank. Give us, just paint a little picture to us on what you're doing on this platform. Of course, when you're talking investments, this is your area of expertise.
Good morning, everyone. Lovely to be here with such distinguished colleagues. Those that might not know the European Investment Bank, this is the development bank of 60 euro worth of it. The commitment to climate targets to African development is part of our DNA, and we're instrumental in delivering European support, particularly in areas such as energy, private sector development. So the topic that we're gathered to is completely in line with the EU priorities, and therefore, as a policy bank, also. Just to give you a notion, the European Investment Bank uses a very wide variety of tools, and also and do much. So really, the idea is to tailor-make the package that is needed for the prosper. And so part of our model is that we are always in partnership mode. The EIB is limited to 50% of project value. That's what we can finance. So we are all for partners to bring into a project. And there the private sector is obviously extremely key. The strength that we have is that we can bring in other financial institutions in European development finance that may not have exposure, be comfortable in some areas in this market. We consider ourselves as builders of bridges and working together with certain institutions such as the African Bank. It's a very powerful. we invest about €1 billion into a year. With utility scale on very, very small projects. We've been growing the activities in the off-grid electrification, the near-grid electrification over the past few years, and that are, you know, extremely small and sort of pilot project in nature, but which have the potential to be scaled. The point is to show that it's feasible, that it's profitable, and most of all, that it does what His Excellency the Minister said to us this morning, which is it creates impact on the ground, lasting impact. That's what we're about. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll now come to the ladies here and start with Caro Koech, Schneider Electric, to briefly introduce Schneider to us. And again, paint a picture to us on what you're doing to support the private sector, and especially on this front of renewable electrification.
Thank you very much for your question. So, Schneider Electric is an energy management and industrial automation organization. But beyond that, we are very much active in the energy access space. We started an access program in 2009, and it comprises of 3 dimensions. So the first one is a training and entrepreneur program. We work with different institutions, largely technical institutions, to ensure that we impart skills, technical skills around electrification and electricity. We have as well a second dimension, which is a social and here really we push and innovate on products that people get access to electricity, and we do have a booth outside there, which you can have a look at. And thirdly, and maybe what is more relevant to today's discussion, is we do have impact fund, not one, but several. So we have in 2009, there was the first fund, which is called Schneider Electric Energy Fund, which really focused on carbon, and most of these funds, Schneider is partner. Specifically, Sub-Saharan Africa, we have a fund called Energy Access Ventures. And we have invested in a number of companies, notably Sun Culture, Imperial Farms, and the likes. And really, we look at companies that have, impact on energy access. We also have Asia. The way we look at the renewable energy and sustainability is really integrated into our business. And we have made a number of commitments that we will be talking about. Hopefully we have more time.
I come to you quickly and tell us a bit more on the same line.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's in fact Yava.
Yava.
But everyone makes the same mistake. Gakuoh Clean Energy. Some of you might have heard of us, or potentially some of the facilities that we manage. Gakuoh is a climate and impact fund manager. We design and manage specifically tailored financing facilities to address the challenges, to address the financing needs, and to bring climate finance to markets and market segments where it's challenging to attract capital. So we currently manage several active facilities, one of which is Spark Energy Services for CNI solar and energy efficiency. There's a Tide facility for renewable energy in the Pacific region. But I think perhaps here in the room, most of you will know Gakuoh for the Renewable Energy Performance Platform, or REP, which is a financing facility that we have managed since about 2015. It was designed, in fact, by the United Nations Environment Programme and the EIB. But has been financed until today exclusively by UK government through its climate finance, managed by Department for the FCDO, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. And so through REP, we can support specifically decentralized, smaller scale renewable energy across the continent, both on on-grid and off-grid sectors. And in the off-grid space, we have made several investments in the SHS space, as well as multiple investments in the mini-grid market. We were one of the, I would say, early funders of mini-grids. The idea of REP and the mandate of REP is really to provide what we call flexible capital for growth. And that is really the core of our approach. So we aim to be as flexible as possible and to meet the needs of developers and of companies, to meet them where they are, both in terms of ticket size, in terms of when we come in to provide, whether it's development capital or construction capital, and really to help them deliver the impact that they are there to deliver. So perhaps that will do for an introduction, and look forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Very enriching. I would like us to sum up this with Mr. Cédric. Please, from the European Union perspective, talk to us on this first point. We're very, very interested to hear from you.
Thank you very much. The European Union traditionally has provided grants to support the energy sector, to support change and to trigger reforms. It has reached some result to a certain extent with the provision of access to electricity to 20 million people, but still there has been a shift in terms of the way we work, and I'm happy that my colleague from the European Investment Bank spoke before, because this is indeed the way we want to work. We want to leverage more financing through the European Development Finance institutions, through international finance institutions, and of course, through the private sector. We position ourselves as deal breakers by making good use of our grants for the commercial sectors like the energy, to be able to attract investment that would not otherwise have been possible and going up to scale. Our funds to individual countries amount to more than 1.5 billion euros for sustainable energy in the period 2021 to 27, and this will involve also the European Union member states. So we will work all together as what we call Team Europe. Just a last word maybe from my side on this first question. Eventually, we are also mobilizing assistance through advisory services such as Get Invest, actually, and other dedicated financial instruments such as Electrify, ARE Scale-Up and Facility for Energy Inclusion. Let me stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To the interest of time, I would just go to the very last question on the plenary, which I think touch on each and every one of you. And I would actually start with AfDB, Dr. Daniel. I'd like you to just talk to us on the key mechanisms you have put in place to de-risk the private investments in the decentralized renewables, and especially on the wider green recovery, please.
Thank you very much for the question in terms of de-risking. And clearly that de-risking question applies both to policy de-risking side, but also, of course, to de-risking of investments. I indicated earlier that on our side, particularly through our Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, which is now an in-house blended finance facility that we have grown over the last 3 years, from basically being just a technical assistance provider to a fully fledged blended finance facility that can provide sort of critical concessional funding for innovative businesses, for larger scale programs. And that really is critical, sort of that capital, that concessional capital to de-risk investments, whether that's in the form, in the context of mini grids of result-based financing, whether that's, for example, we're looking at the moment at sort of, how can we provide minimum demand guarantees, which obviously the demand question is a key consideration in the mini-grid context. So if you can provide such a guarantee, that obviously helps to de-risk these type of investments. So that's sort of one area. Clearly, kind of having a pool of concessional resources that can provide sort of that critical support is essential. I think a second aspect, and maybe just to very quickly highlight in the context of COVID-19, which is having, as indicated, an impact on the sector. We've also been able to create what we call the COVID-19 off-grid recovery platform. So we've been trying to provide sort of relief capital very early on when the crisis started to hit. But instead of creating sort of a new facility, a new fund, we thought, let's work through some of those companies, some of those funds that are already active in the energy access space. So we have been able now to provide sort of that relief capital in the form of reimbursable grants operating through 3 competitively selected funds in the energy access space, whether that's Triple Jump, whether that's CEMA, and indeed Lions Head Global Partners. And that really helps sort of to leverage additional investments from the commercial funds, blended with sort of these reimbursable grants from our side, and sort of starting to have an impact in terms of providing critical relief capital to the energy access companies. So that's sort of one example of how we use sort of concessional resources in a catalytic way to provide sort of that critical support to companies.
Very, very important. We're trying to pull ourselves out of the pandemic that has hit everybody globally. Mr. Michael, the European Investment Bank, of course, has some areas of supporting the private investments. Talk to us on the same point. How are you de-risking these private investments, and especially in the renewable context?
Thanks for the question. Very important question. Since we expect the private sector to do most of the heavy lifting, it stands to reason that institutions such as ours are auxiliaries or supporters of this. So the main principle is to let the private sector do what it does best and support it wherever we can. But in terms of what we can provide to the private sector, I would say in general terms, it's financing at competitive rates. That's combining our own financial resources and blending concessional resources, so mobilizing investment from third parties. It's working so that the tenors of the loans are interesting and acceptable for the counterparts. We also have in-house a lot of engineering expertise that some other financial institutions do not have. So we can support with project structuring, due diligence, preparation of tender documents, etc. And we also provide technical assistance to private sector entrepreneurs who wish to access financing from, again, not only the European Investment Bank, but other investors. We not only try to do this in the context of the off-grid renewable energy projects, but indeed working through other initiatives that we have, and especially now that we are, since COVID, in a general crisis response mode. We have been looking at, for example, the programs that we have for women's entrepreneurship, to try to focus that on green and clean energy entrepreneurship. So to support women entrepreneurs in Africa through our She Invest initiative to develop these types of businesses. We are working with an organization called Res for Africa to support the next generation of young African clean energy entrepreneurs. We are working with financial institutions like the African Export-Import Bank, Afrexim Bank, which in the context of crisis recovery have been so important to ensure that small and medium enterprises have access to capital that they need. So building on this relationship, we have been able to very quickly provide financing through Afreximbank to these SMEs, but ensure that a part of this goes towards clean energy businesses. So whether directly or indirectly, but always in partnership, we feel that we have a number of very interesting facilities and solutions for the private sector entrepreneurs who wish to develop these types of projects.
Thank you very much, Michael. There you have it. We have interesting instruments from the European Investment Bank. Now, I'll jump now into some specific questions for this panel, due to the interest of time, and please give your submissions in 3 minutes. And I would start with IRENA, right? It is already widely very known that you're doing some very good job on supporting countries in their transition to sustainable energy future and the green recovery, yeah? So could you possibly give us some highlights of a few countries and examples, your work, the works that you're doing, especially to support those countries on this matter of green recovery?
Thank you very much. In fact, IRENA, we have 106, if I don't recall incorrectly, 167 members and another 20 countries in the process of membership. So what we are talking about and close to universal membership base. And this is very much reflected in the IRENA's engagement with the countries and the level of support we provide. Just to give you a sense of the level of engagement we have, only for the purpose of supporting NDC enhancement and NDC implementation. In the last 2 years, we have supported 80 countries through 170 streams of work. And this entails starting from statistics to data collection, resource assessment, energy planning, helping them in developing decarbonization plans, several assessments we do, but eventually also helping them in project facilitation. So that's why the level of engagement in Africa also quite extensive, and we have engaged more than 30 countries in Africa during that process. Just to give you a very concrete examples, one is in Burkina Faso, that we have been working with them in 2 fronts. One is the so-called renewable readiness assessment, to helping them to identify the challenges for renewable energy development and coming up with a set of recommendations that can be implemented in the short to medium term to improve the investment environment in the country. And part of this exercise, we undertook a so-called bankability assessment, looking specifically on the investment environment and also the bankability factors or key elements of bankability in the country for the renewable energy projects. Another stream that we have in Burkina Faso is the energy health nexus work we do. So what we have done through a very ecosystem approach to how we can help or integrate renewable energy solutions into the electrification of rural health clinics, which is an extremely important issue, especially during the pandemic. So what we do is not a simple solution for electrifying rural health clinics, but looking into the building design, looking into the IT requirements, looking into the efficiency of appliances or different equipment used in the health centers, and coming up with a solution that will address it, an electrification solution that will address all this as an integrated solution. What we produce is 2 solutions. One is for the already existing clinics, how to improve them and provide electricity. And the second solution is providing a blueprint for new health facilities that will be expanded through the network, an expanded network in the country for rural health clinics. And then once this comes up with a investment requirement and which could be easily converted into project proposals. Now we are discussing with several MDBs and financial institutions how this program can be financed. So this is one example of an integrated solution that we are trying to provide at the country level.
80 countries, tremendous. Schneider, Madam Koech, I'll come now to you with a very simple question here. You tell us how your organization is sort of combining capacity building and investments, and how this integration comes into your day-to-day business model.
So Schneider Electric is on a mission, and our mission is to be your digital partner to companies for efficiency and sustainability. And so our business model is aligned to really the global sustainability imperative. And this permeates our entire business strategy and really contributing to the transition to cleaner renewable energy. Now, if by capacity building, you're referring to our training program, which I mentioned earlier, really there is none. Here, the programs are independent. The training program is fully subsidized, and the target is just to give jobs to young people. However, we are currently working on a scheme to help trained people to start their own businesses. This we are doing in India, and obviously those businesses, we could potentially invest in them through our impact funds. So we are committed in terms of capacity building, especially in the energy sector, particularly in the electricity and the renewable energy, by looking really deeply into the skills of young people, developing those skills specifically in the industries where we are operating, and to really boost what we are looking at in terms of both the electricity and the electrotechnical support sectors. So the idea here is really just to improve the quality of lives of those people. And we do this through the Schneider Electric Foundation, which really focuses and supports long-term training using the vocational and entrepreneurial training organizations. So, and we work with, electricians, associations, and the likes to develop this. And the idea is this training program really, we put about 67% of the funding is allocated from the foundation.
Thank you very much, Koech. Let me jump to Mr. Cédric, and this is on the front of the European Union. Yeah, I'd wish that you possibly give us a picture of how EU envisions to collaborate with the industry to catalyze such investments, within the industries, and also support EU on the efforts that basically are aligning with the 300 billion investments that you've put on infrastructure and climate and energy as well.
Thank you very much. The ambassador talked before of this global gateway. So the global gateway is the new European strategy to step up its offer to its partner with major investments in infrastructure development around the world. Between 2021 and 2027, Team Europe, meaning the EU institutions and EU member states jointly, will mobilize up to 300 billion euros of investment. The global gateway will combine and leverage resources from the EU, the member states, financial institutions, and multilateral public partners, but of course also, as I was mentioning before, crowding in private capital. In the area of energy connectivity in support to the green transition, EU will invest in infrastructure and support regulation to pave the way for clean energy transition in partner countries, jointly with the industry. We will cooperate in particular to enable just energy transition including through renewable hydrogen production, invest in a resilient raw material value chain. It was touched upon in one of the previous points. Promote the creation of competitive markets and diversify our clean energy supply. So this is what the EU would offer. What the EU, and I would take advantage to promote a bit a few preliminary ideas. What we would expect from the side of the industry is mostly to be a vibrant actor in terms of public-private dialogue. Of course, this is critical to a conducive regulatory framework and to more investment. Secondly, we would like to see European startups and technology companies share knowledge and connect in business with like-minded local entrepreneurs. This kind of event is a great opportunity for B2B, and this is where we hope that deals can be broken. Thirdly, I would see here an opportunity for partnerships in terms of trainings, for example, with companies such as Schneider, such as NG, but most of the companies actually here to trainings for future engineers, for example, that will be recruited by the private sector, so that we have a clear match between what the education sector brings and what the private, let's say, the market expects, because we have seen in the past some disconnect between the education of the youth and the expectation of the private companies that would hire young engineers or young technicians. So here we would like for partnerships. We are ready to co-finance these actions in order to create really a comprehensive, let me say, value chain in terms of human resources as well. And eventually, maybe a last point from my side, we had speakers this morning. There was no women. We have here speakers, panelists sitting here. We have a third of representation of women. You would have told me I could have maybe tried to find a colleague to balance a bit, but what my message here, and I see also in the room that maybe 1/3 of the colleagues here maybe are women. So I would really encourage the industry as well to have a better representation of women in the business. It is really a lost opportunity in terms of economic gain, not to have gender equality. And I would like to acknowledge in particular the presence of our two fellow female leaders here in this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would like you to salvage this situation, because we are told we don't have much women representation here, which we all agree. But I would like you to possibly provide a broad range. I mean, you guys provide a broad range of financing products, right? And this is where you support clients in very unique sets of circumstances and the needs. I would like you to let us know which are your instruments that you see as the biggest demand from the private sector, and which financing products would you see as the most critical in the coming years, please?
Oh, that's a big question. We could probably have a whole session focused on that. So yes, indeed. So REP particularly provides both debt and equity and anything in between. So whether it's convertible notes or mezzanine, all types of debt, really depending on what is required. We are trying to be additional in a sense of coming in where others are not there yet, and trying to bring other DFIs and other financiers together with us. I think all types of capital are needed. It's, we should probably speak about different market subsegments. So, if we want to address this question, whether it's SHS or mini grids, yes, we see that development capital, corporate equity is particularly missing. We've seen a lot of interest in some SHS companies in developing off-balance sheets financing solutions, and we heard some, I think all of us, some interesting announcements recently. So there are innovative and interesting developments going on there. Of course, project finance has become much more used in the mini-grid space. In fact, REP, in partnership with Cross-Boundary Energy Access, were the first ones to use this approach. I'm looking at my colleague there in the end of the room, to design this approach and to use it in partnership with PowerGen in Tanzania, in fact, with their project portfolio here. So we could be talking about all different types of solutions. Some of them are, the market is has more availability of than others. But I do think that what should be the key takeaways for us is not even about identifying the key missing financial instruments, but it's rather the approach. So I think for funders specifically, my message would be that we need to jointly be more flexible. This is, as I said, it has been ingrained in REP's approach. But really, I think that, we're trying to challenge others also to think along the same lines. So even if we're, applying project finance for mini-grids, we can't do this in the same way that, some of us are used to in the large scale infrastructure sector. If we are funding the off-grid space, I think what is kind of puzzling a lot of investors right now is, where to place these new different business models with SHS companies moving more into productive use space, or, solar charge battery rental companies emerging. It's sort of puzzling us, but we do need to be flexible and open up our thinking to be able to offer the financing solutions to these companies that are bringing, the very valuable inputs to the market. And then for, again, in terms of approach, so that was my message to the financiers, my colleagues, and sometimes competitors, but I think more often partners. But even more so, there's, I think, a very strong message which has been mentioned a lot today, which is focusing on the risk element, particularly with the enabling environment. So that's policy, regulatory risk. And I'm very glad that, so some of my distinguished colleagues on the panel are working through their organizations and teams very hard on this issue. That is very important for funders like us and others. It's the transparency, clarity, and the longevity of the policy frameworks when it comes to national electrification strategies. And also the regulatory framework. So knowing what will happen when the grid arrives, knowing that the tariffs will be as they were set, in the beginning. For funders, maybe we are a bit boring, but we like this, longer term approach and the certainty. And also, there are other risks that I think some donors and AfDB in particular and others are very increasingly thinking on how to address, and that's particularly the demand risk. So looking for maybe new instruments like demand guarantees, like insurance for the mini-grid sector or the SHS sector could really bring down in the end, the risk. And for financiers, the risk is always associated with the cost of capital. The cost of capital in turn is associated with, of course, what goes into the tariff. And if we are talking about green recovery and really electricity, as the minister highlighted this morning, is really a stepping stone. It's only the stepping stone towards social and economic development. We need to have an affordable tariff. And yes, as a financier, of course, for us, it's important that we can pay back the capital costs. But in the end, the tariff has to be affordable. And this is where we need to work with governments and with the development partners in making it more affordable, that to be able to support this green growth, which we all want to see, I think.
Fantastic. I wish to continue this discussion, but it is really getting time constrained. Nevertheless, I would have two more remarks. And Mr. Daniel, you spoke earlier about COVID recovery, right? And we are aware that in 2021, AfDB launched a COVID off-grid recovery platform to support DRE companies, yeah? And I wish just maybe you give us a few outcomes of this initiative and how the instruments you've provided to support has possibly given us a better stand than where we were. And are you still intending to continue support for the green recovery? Mr. Daniel.
Thank you very much for the question. And just to expand on what I briefly mentioned in my earlier intervention, indeed, the COVID-19 off-grid recovery platform, basically we leveraged concessional resources in the form of reimbursable grants from our Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, working through 3 energy access funds that have already portfolio companies that they're working with, and that collectively has sort of increased the amount of relief funding to around $70 million. 44% of the portfolio of companies that have been supported were in the area of solar home systems, another 33% in commercial industrial solar, 16% in green mini grids, and the remaining 7% were mainly solar solutions for irrigation. Just to mention maybe 2 examples of companies that were supported through this COVID-19 off recovery platform. One example is a $4 million investment in Yellow, which distributes solar home systems to underserved population, mainly in Malawi and Uganda, and they have been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. So obviously this kind of funding helped them to address some of these constraints. Another example is a $1 million investment in Facera, which is a manufacturer of solar home systems, again, very heavily impacted by COVID-19, and that kind of funding is sort of helping them to overcome some of the challenges that they are facing. The crisis is not over. As I said earlier, it's compounded by the Ukraine war, particularly in terms of supply chain disruptions. And this is why we are looking at the second phase at the moment of the COVID-19 off recovery platform. So we will be providing an additional $7 million of reimbursable grants from our Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa. And I'm pleased to say that we just obtained earlier this month approval from the Global Environmental Facility to join us in this COVID-19 off recovery platform with $13 million in concessional resources as well. So we are aiming to seek approval from our board of directors in the next 2 months or 3 months for this COVID-19 off the recovery platform phase 2, to make sure that sort of this progress is sustained during the extended kind of crisis period that we're going through. Thank you.
Thank you for those brief remarks. Sorry, I will now go to the last panelist, Mr. Michael. And in this, I'll beg to ask you that European Investment Bank so far been supporting initiatives that are combining critical infrastructure and climate change in sustainable electricity. Yeah. So all the critical elements of green recovery are factored in this. So what are the main incentives that you are offering to private sector to coexist in such projects, please?
Thanks. I answered a little bit of that in my earlier question in terms of what our offer is to the private sector. But I think just to underline that, you know, we have multiple crises, we have overlapping crises, and in some cases we're going to have to be grappling with this for a long time. The fallout of COVID alone for rural electrification, I mean, the numbers were mentioned earlier, it has not been good, and it has thrown us back, you know, in the pursuit of SDG 7 potentially for years. So it's not only important to have you know, immediate or very quick response for the private sector in terms of, you know, keeping projects afloat, and also continuing private sector investors to invest into projects with the certainty that they will be accompanied by financial institutions. But it's more of a long-term issue that we have to be dealing with here, which is how do we ensure that the offer that we provide to the private sector actors in the first instance, but also other actors in the ecosystem, and also the governmental side, the regulatory side, etc., how we ensure that that keeps on going if other policy objectives become more important. And by that I mean food security issues and other types of issues that we are seeing. So how do we together keep the focus of decision makers of financiers, of partners, of donors, of everyone involved in this space through this moment that, you know, potentially will have long-term impacts.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. We are now at the very end of this panel. I would like to give each of you less than a minute to give a closing submission. And I'm very sure that majority of you might have interesting questions. We shall have more than enough time after this at the coffee break, and as well as on the various matchmaking booths. For example, you might find these participants there, and also over lunchtime in this case. I would start with Yawa. Less than a minute. Give us your closing submission and what inspires you now that we are looking at the Energy Access Investment Forum 2022. Please give us your closing submission. No, what inspires you? Yeah.
I think I think what inspires me is seeing so many different stakeholders in this room. So my role as a policy manager is very much to bridge the gaps between the public and the private sector. And a lot of our deals over the past few years have been really slowed down by policy regulatory issues. And I know that, all the government representatives in the room here, just like us, really want to see the achievement of SDG 7 in time. And so I think, again, maybe that's nothing new, but I would really encourage, this dialogue between the two of us. And I think particularly with seeing lenders and investors as partners as well. I think a lot of the time, we face challenges in engaging with some of the government representatives. So I think it's, it's really to see that we should have this dialogue, and that will help us move forward.
Phenomenal. Carol.
So I think for me, I'm inspired to see so many people working towards the same goal of ensuring that we have energy access. And at Schneider Electric, we have made a commitment that to reach 50 million people, our own contribution by 2025, and to reach 100 million by 2030. And so far, we have been able to electrify about 34 million people. So really, I on a personal note, I am similar to the minister earlier. I'm one of those that did not have energy access for most of my life. And my parents only got connected about 4 years ago. So it's a personal ambition as well.
Thank you very much. I know where you're coming from, Carol. Cédric.
So if you can become minister or CEO of Schneider without electricity, I don't think we need this conference. We do. Okay. So inspiration for me is to be together, to have this opportunity for B2B, for B2G, because it's a lot about working together. We talked about big initiatives such as for the European Union, the Global Gateway, with this opportunity to leverage, to de-risk and to leverage additional funding, in particular with the European Investment Bank, but also with other international financing institutions such as the African Development Bank and other partners. But eventually, the job is to be done on the ground, and it starts by talking to each other, by working together. And so the inspiration to me is the opportunity to build partnerships. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Daniel, very briefly.
Thank you very much. I think in addition to what colleagues have already highlighted, one key inspiration from my side is really the innovation that I'm seeing from the participants, from the energy access community, just walking briefly past the different stands outside. I think that's tremendous. This is really what is driving change, together with the opportunity, as was highlighted, to engage with the different stakeholders to really achieve that scale up, which I think is the mission for this Energy Access Forum this week. Thank you.
Great. Dr. Gonul.
Thank you. I think what we have heard during the discussions in the morning, that there are various institutions in an effort to produce those financing schemes to support decentralized renewable energy deployment. But what we have not heard much about is how we can develop those strong pipeline of projects and then bring them to bankability, and then match them with those financing schemes that can provide that required concessionality in order to those projects to happen. Now, I didn't have a chance to talk about the new ETAF platform that IRENA has created. It was announced during COP26, but the agreements have been signed just last week with Abu Dhabi Fund for Development and Masdar to create this ETAF Energy Transition Accelerator Financing Platform. They have already pledged $400 million, but the aim is to bring it up to $1 billion, and we are discussing already with several different financial institutions to that happen. But more important still, I would like to highlight those strong pipeline of projects and how we can help to bring those project proposals to bankability is a key.
Thank you very much. Mr. Michael.
Well, my distinguished co-panelists haven't left me but just to see that we can gather again in person and discuss these things, and that's always much more fruitful than any number of Zoom meetings. That's inspiring. But also to see young Africans seeing that clean energy is a future, not only for their livelihoods, but also as a profession, as a business, as something that they would like to dedicate their lives to. And I think that the clean energy revolution in Africa stands or falls with those young, motivated, energetic people who get up and fight every day for their vision. And I think as development financiers, we can only be inspired by that and be as helpful as we can.
Thank you ever so much, Mr. Michael, for those beautiful, fantastic closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our first panel of the day. I would like to ask all of you to put your hands together to appreciate the panel for those enriching. We are more than excited to have some discussions with you on the coffee break. Please engage with this audience because they still are hungry for more. You have had some very enriching submissions here, and I would encourage that you do please pass it forward. And the entire day we shall have more than to celebrate because we shall have gathered more that we have not found from this stage yet. Again, thank you ever so much, and I believe it's time for the coffee break. Thank you.